Well, welcome to episode 45 of the Fertility Rewire podcast. And for those of you who listen as the episodes are released, you'll have noticed that it's been 3 weeks since my last episode. Ordinarily, I do a fortnightly podcast, but I followed the advice that I give to all of my clients in the work, and I'm afraid the pressure had to come off last week. So here I am this week. And what I've decided to do is a much shorter episode. I think what I'm going to try and do moving forward is intersperse these short episodes in between longer ones and interviews, which always seem to last for longer. So getting to the point, I hope you're well. This episode, I'm going to talk about something that is huge in terms of my client conversations, in terms of most people in what they're doing in different aspects of their life, but particularly, of course, when it comes to fertility. And that is the use of the word should. I should do this. And also, why should I? And I'm going to start to address that internal narrative in terms of, what that self-talk is and what you can do to reduce the emotional impact of these words. I mentioned Tiger Taming and also how the Tiger Taming digital pack is on its way. And also, just to let you know, the Fertility Rewire digital pack, so a generic consultation and action plan, that digital pack is going to be available soon, and I will be announcing that first on the email list. So if you're not on the email list already, you can join that. If you go to fertilityrewire.com, you can join the mailing list and you can be among the first to find out about the digital pack that is coming soon. Anyway, I really hope you enjoyed this episode. It's not a long one, but hopefully there are some real key take-homes for you here. Take care. Hello and welcome to the Fertility Rewire podcast, a place for information and discussion around topics relevant to fertility. I'm your host, Kat Stevens. I'm a fertility coach and founder of the Fertility Rewire program. And I'm passionate about people being given sufficient information to enhance their own fertility awareness. I wanted to touch upon some common themes that I come across in sessions with my clients and that I come across in my own life and may ring true for many people. Now, I work with people on the physical side of things. We really dig into what's going on physically to support the body, things that might have been missed, avenues that we might be able to look at, and aspects of self-care to improve fertility. I also work with people in terms of being an advocate, in terms of what their next steps are. But the key area that comes up time and time again in all aspects of what I'm doing is that self-talk, the narrative that you're hearing, the narrative that's going on in your head. Now, the biggest one I think I come across is the word should. So are you saying to yourself, I know I shouldn't do X, Y, Z. I know I should do. What should I do? It's a very, very powerful word. Also, what comes along is, why should I? Why should I do that? Because other people get pregnant and they haven't had to do that. Other people get pregnant and they're overweight. Other people get pregnant and they don't have a healthy diet. So why should I do that? And it's a really interesting aspect to dig into. And I invite you to ask yourself, how many times are you using the word should in terms of yourself, first of all? I know I should do that, but that's a big one. And one of the things that we can do with this is just a simple replacement. If you replace the word should with could. So I know I should exercise. I know I should eat more healthily. I could exercise. I could eat more healthily. That brings that to you, to a decision that you are making. I should means that somebody or some advice or some, even if you know it to be true, something is telling you to do that. That's your perception. So you should because that's the right thing. You should because that's what you've been told. Try, I could. See how that goes. It's really, really powerful. When it comes to why should I, and this becomes huge and can often trigger various aspects that come into emotional health and triggers. It's too broad for me to go into huge detail because obviously it's specific to the individual and that comes out in chats. But I just want to give you some thought to put to it. So why should I? So when you sit with that, why should you? Is it unfair? Is it that there's no proof? Is it that you're not in control? Is it that you're feeling overwhelmed? So why should I? Because other people don't. And it's really, really powerful to sit with that. Feel where you feel it in your body and listen to that voice, because that voice will be from something that has happened previously and may show up in different areas of your life. It may be that actually you were exposed to criticism, that there was emotional upheaval in your life. That could have been about weight or something different. And then when you get to a point in your life where you've worked through that, you're happy with yourself, you're where you are, then you're told something from an external source, it can reignite that. Why should I? Why should I? Those people aren't. That is igniting something, often from childhood, often from a limiting belief that's laid down. So there are a number of ways that I approach this with clients. Obviously, we have discussions and it comes out in discussions, and we do work on the thoughts and the narrative, and being able to see this narrative as thoughts may be all that's needed. To see this narrative as a thought that leads to a feeling, that leads to an action, that leads to a result. That is my process within Tiger Taming, and that is the work that we do to recognize the narrative, to identify the thought, and to put measures in place to distance. And for many people, that is enough. But sometimes we dig in a little bit deeper. We dig into where that belief comes from. We dig into addressing that belief at source, which then has massive implications for lots of changes and things going forward. But first of all, I would invite you to identify those thoughts, identify that narrative, and almost view it as an external voice, a voice that is saying that to you. I've often talked in my own life about my poisonous parrot that will sit on my shoulder and say things to me that, undermines my self-confidence. That's been an issue for me in the past. It undermines my self-confidence, or is telling me that things are unfair. And that comes from way, 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 way back for me. People often talk about the chattering chimp. You hear about that. There are books. There's lots of information about the chattering chimp, and there's the chimp paradox that you can read about that if you want to dig in deeper to what's happening within the brain. That there are these different parts speaking that represent the different aspects of the brain, and that I could go on, but I'm going to lose the point of this if I'm not careful. So all I really wanted to say in this short episode was, can you identify the narrative? What is the language that is being spoken? I know I should. We can change that if we can. I know it's not always straightforward to I could. Is it why should I? And is that why should I a need for certainty? Because that's an issue in itself, and that's something I'm coming across a lot. What does the doctor mean by this? We're second guessing and we're questioning, and then we take that back further, and that comes back to an element of trust. Are you actually trusting that the medical team have got your best interests at heart? What is it that you are doubting in this? What is your doubt? Where does that why should I come from? So is it a need for certainty? Is it a factor of trust? Is it an element of control? And this is huge in terms of the stress of trying to conceive. Because of all the things we do, it is not within our control. And that can be one of the biggest triggers that's coming along. But there are ways that we can deal with this. Deal sounds very strong, but we can address this and get that bigger awareness, which reduces the stress, which reduces the turmoil, the questions, and just distances that narrative, quietens that narrative, and for some, gets rid of it altogether. So Tiger Taming is a part of what I do, and I'm excited that is coming out in a digital format soon. So if you're not on the mailing list, I would ask you to get on the mailing list, because that's where I'll be announcing that first. So it's over 4 weeks. It's a self-care program instruction that you can use. It's also part of the work I do on a one-to-one basis. So what are your shoulds? Can you change them to coulds? What are your why should I's? Can you dig into that a little bit and get a sense of that voice? And see how you go. Use some journaling. Journaling is a fancy word for writing it down on a piece of paper or in a notebook, but get it down on paper. See that conversation play out. See where you go. And if you've got any questions, please get in touch. Please let me know what you think about this episode. Free one-to-one chats are always available, and you can access that at fertilityrewire.com. But I'd love to hear from you, and I hope that's given you a bit of an insight and a bit of a help. Take care.
You've been listening to the Fertility Rewire podcast with me, Kat Stevens. If you wanted to find any further details, then you can check out the website, fertilityrewire.com, or find me on Instagram or Facebook or Pinterest at Fertility Rewire.